Welcome to episode 113 of the Hard Truth About B2B e-commerce. I'm your co-host Isaiah Bollinger, and I'm back with Tim. I think maybe we skipped a week, or I don't know. I can't remember anymore.
We're so busy. It's hard to remember if we're here or not. But it's great to be back. And hello everyone, Timothy Peterson here. I want to give a couple shout outs. I did get some more reactions and had some conversations with friends about listening to the podcast. So Beth Ashby, who is a big tech recruiter, an executive recruiter, she listens to us. Love that.
Wow.
I didn't know that recruiters, too many were listening. We do have Harry
Sure,
Joyner.
all of our not employees, but future placements are listening to the podcast.
They should be listening. The best people in the world are passing through here for B2B. So we do have Harry Joyner and Beth Ashby, among others, who are listening here, who are top recruiters. So shout out to you guys. I also want to say hi to, let me see if I remember. We have, oh my God, now I'm blanking on their names. Joshua Tippergan again. I want to say hi to Betsy Emery Martin. These folks work in tech, agency side. And then also Chris Timmis, who is on the investor side of things. He is an avid listener. He's invested in a lot of tech startups over the years, so I'm giving a shout out to him. Please reach out anytime. I always tell listeners to do this. Just find me and I'll say hi. Tell us how you're liking the podcast. Thank you. And now I'm going to pause very quickly for our sponsor mentions to be inserted, and I'll throw it back to Isaiah to introduce our guest. Balance is a B2B e-commerce payment solution that works well for you and for your buyers. It offers a seamless one-click checkout for almost any payment method, including ACH, wire, checks, cards, even terms. It's used by leaders in B2B e-commerce, and it's as easy as buying a shirt from Amazon. Check them out at getbalance.com. Book a session and tell them what your needs are. They are the first dedicated payment platform for B2B e-commerce, 100% tailored to your needs. Thanks again to our sponsor, Balance. Isaiah, who do we have today?
Yeah, I'm excited to introduce Derek Sewell from Director of Strategic Accounts at datax.ai. I do need to make sure that we put in the .ai, like you said. That's AI is obviously a big piece of what you guys are doing, and I assume kind of growing into as it evolves. So tell us about yourself and what datax.ai is.
Thanks, Isaiah, and thanks for having me on. Again, Derek Sewell here. I oversee, again, all of our strategic accounts and even partnerships now. The journey has been quite interesting. Here with the organization, I've been going on 5 years this Christmas, and it's hard to believe I've already been here this long. My journey is kind of interesting. I worked for AT&T Corporate. They have obviously telecom mobility in their SaaS programs as well. So I was heavily involved in there for, goodness, almost 14 years. And then I really went on this journey of wanting to, focus more in the tech AI space, specifically in the startup space, because I wanted to be a part of, obviously, have the journey of a huge conglomerate, but now I wanted to focus and build something and be at that ground level. And thankfully, so our company has been growing over the past so many years. We're roughly about 8 years old, and we've been on this journey of becoming well known in the data science space. So, datax.ai is part of a company called Crowd Analytics. Many of the data scientists are really, that's what we're known for in terms of, in the data science community. They are kind of more so known as just being the world's largest community of data scientists on a crowdsourcing platform, often compared to like a Kaggle before Google kind of swallowed them whole and all that good stuff. But Crowd Analytics is essentially brought in for maybe Fortune 500 companies to build custom AI solutions. And ultimately, these data scientists on our platform, it's a crowdsourcing platform, they compete to build custom models. They compete against each other to build custom baseline models, and they actually win money that way. And really, it's about ranking and all that good stuff. Well, the nice part about it is crowd analytics, because we consult and build custom AI solutions. We are able to leverage those competitions and take those baseline models. And of course, these are all anonymized, all that good stuff. But we take those models, tune them, train them, and tweak them for any of our enterprise AI custom solutions. And what really brought us on this journey, DataX.ai, is we came onto this problem of product data in the B2C space as well as B2B, and that made us aware that product data is a challenge, right, for everyone. And getting that from manufacturers and being able to, ingest that data and then use it for your e-commerce, your PIM, your MDM, your ERP system, it requires a lot of manual effort. And so we really, once we started uncovering this challenge, that opened our eyes. And we'll probably talk a little bit more about this here shortly. But I want to turn this back over to you guys.
No, thank you for that. That was really great. I have one other question about your background. I like asking this with people sometimes. So, AI is not something most people were thinking about when they were 13 or 14 years old. So what were you thinking, like toward the end of high school and the beginning of college, you would be doing versus what you're doing now?
It's quite interesting. I thought I was going to be more so involved in international relations, specifically working in different nonprofits, NGOs. And actually, that was part of my journey. I actually went and lived at some different orphanages and different parts of the world, working there, fighting sex trafficking, all that good stuff for humanitarian relief.
Pretty cool.
So yeah. And so actually, it's something I'm really passionate about, and we just got a green light. We're also leveraging for our company, DataX.ai, is we're leveraging AI for good. So we're actually donating machine learning services to these types of NGOs to help them combat and speed up their efforts for fighting sex trade. I mean, it's just amazing things. We're going to make more of this public in the future, but it's revolutionary. It's really cool.
Well, I want to give you a round of applause for that. So that's great. I didn't expect an answer, but thank you. That's great.
Sure.
Really great.
Well, thank you. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a small effort, a small part of, obviously the need is so great. So I feel honored to be able to do what we do, even in, the situation that we're in.
Well, that's the nice thing about technology. Well, the good and bad. It can be used for really great purposes. It can also be used for really bad things.
Yeah.
I think one thing I like about B2B commerce is, like, I think we can all say, the three of us on this podcast, when you're influencing these industries, like, we're really helping, maybe not exciting things that look cool, but like the nuts and bolts of how things work and get to people's doors and, feed people or build buildings, or most of the things that make things happen are like these behind the scenes B2B organizations that, aren't necessarily that cool on the surface, but they're the ones distributing the goods, making the goods, getting things to people, right? And so
absolutely.
And that's kind of the purpose of the podcast, right? A lot of that stuff has been, fairly legacy from a digital perspective, and we're hoping to elevate that. And I think one of the reasons I was excited to have you on is, like, probably the most basic, but also most problematic problem that we see is just product data, right? And when I say basic, I don't mean that solving it is necessarily simple. I just mean it's kind of obvious, like, hey, you got to have better product data, but for whatever reason, B2B companies just struggle with it. Like you said, I think maybe you could tell that story that we talked off the pod, but about how you guys realized it was even worse in B2B than B2C, might illuminate what we're talking about here. But it's kind of astounding how bad it is, and how, like, I think one of the things we preach is that's like one of the first steps that we think companies should go through to make their experience better.
Absolutely right. It's the fundamental need, right, that it really allows any company to be successful. So completely agree with you.
Tell us a little bit about what do you guys do with that? Like, explain to people, why would they hire you guys? What's different? I mean, there's a lot of these product data services companies out there.
Yeah.
Give a case study if you can. You don't have to name the company, but if you want to give a story.
Yeah, either as
for sure
of an example or the software.
No, absolutely. So when we got into this space, we really were shocked just to see how bad, obviously, product data or the challenge of getting that data. But I'll just example this with a case study. Our company, Crowd Analytics, being the data science company and being well known in the data science community,
Yeah.
and then of course consulting for Fortune 100 companies.
Yeah.
So we were brought in by one of the largest retailers in the world, and they basically said, "Hey, we want to compete against Amazon. We've got about 1 million products in our catalog right now. We also have a massive data science team, massive, 100 plus data scientists. And they've been working on it for a couple of years, trying to see if they could automate some of the processes to ingest data from all of their manufacturers." Well, obviously, all of us know that when manufacturers send data, they don't really send it how you want it, right? They'll send it in various templates or
They send it how they
taxonomy.
want it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if they care about you enough as a retailer or a B2B distributor, they might try to do some manipulation. But again, that's a best case scenario. And even then, as a retailer or B2B distributor, even if you fully trust that that data is good from, that manufacturer, there's always the possibility of human error, right? So how do you mitigate that risk? And so you have to hire people to manually validate that, right? You can have some, ways of automation of, checking and validating, but really at the core, for everyone we've ever seen, they still at the end of the day have to hire people. Well, this massive retailer, they were trying to fight that risk or mitigate that risk. So they had 3,000 people, an army of people that were just looking at that data, validating it, normalizing it, classifying the data, and then even further enriching it. Because, someone might think that they're sending over good data, but then they didn't include all the values that you want in your given taxonomy
It's not
template.
good for your taxonomy, your SEO,
Right.
your competitiveness for search. I think that just highlights the scale that people are competing against. And I think that's why companies don't understand. They're like, "Oh, we're just going to throw a little money at it." It's like these large companies have entire teams just for that one problem, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of what you're up against. And I think that companies just don't appreciate how sophisticated these larger organizations are getting around e-commerce. And I think that's why we feel it's really important to educate the mid-market and these companies that don't have 3,000 data enrichment people that, they got to do something. They can't just kind of, it's
Absolutely
only
right.
going to get harder and harder to compete against this, I think. Right. And so, yeah.
Absolutely right. And even with the 3,000 people that they had, this is the crazy part, Isaiah, is that these folks were just being used for just managing 1 million products. So they couldn't scale. They were
Really
actually
not like it's a
lockstep.
lot, but it's not for 3,000 people. It's not a lot, in my opinion.
Right.
Just that.
Exactly. Yeah. And also, even taking into consideration that was the retail side and they have all these seasonal attributes. So it's not as like, you're just building content and it's static and you never have to
They have
tweak
like
it or
a
modify
Halloween
it.
products or whatever,
Yeah.
candy that comes in and
Right. In retail, it's typically about 12 seasons that they're having to modify, majority or at least some attribute values. And so really this opened our eyes. We were just quite dumbfounded, like, oh my gosh, we had no idea that this was such a challenge. Well, they had been working for years trying to automate some of these solutions because they realized, hey, if we're going to be competitive against Amazon, for us to go from 1 million SKUs, we want to go to 100 million, right? Well, think about that, 3,000 and they're completely consumed for 1 million, right?
300,000, right? Theoretically, they need 100,000 people just for that. It's not very.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there has to be some way of creating automation or at least as much as possible. And obviously there's so much hype and frankly BS about AI and how, a lot of times hype and so many people have gotten burned from it, because they're promised that it could solve every single challenge. And that's fundamentally untrue. And so AI, can help for a lot of things, but not for every situation, right? Not every types of data set or et cetera. So when we came in, we were
still
brought
don't
in to
have
consult.
self-driving cars. I just want to throw that. They've been telling us about these self-driving cars for a decade now, and we're still not there.
Yeah, exactly. I was just driving a Model X the other day, and I put it on the autonomous driving, and I was like, yeah, I still wouldn't trust my life with this. Just seeing what it was doing.
Yeah.
And it's amazing tech, but again, we're just not there yet. So point being is, we're brought in to consult, and then we started building models. And because for us, we have this huge data science engine, we're able to build models at scale. And so most people, or the approach of data science companies from what we've seen, is they'll take a model and they'll assign multiple tasks for that single model. Well, we realized that that's flawed, because again, it's less accuracy because it's having to do so many things. So what we did is we decided, what if we take a model and essentially assign one task, and then create hundreds of models, so each one has individual tasks, and then we stack them. We found that the accuracy was significantly higher, and we realized that we could automate much of the processes that were burdening this team that they had. And so when we started showing this insane level of accuracy and trustworthiness, we were able to go ahead and take over the entire project. And we were also able to replace those 3,000 people, to repurpose them so they could work on more important human needed projects within the organization. And we went ahead and we took them from 1 million products to 100 million products. And then we took them from 100 million to 350 plus million products. And so we did that all within about 24 months.
There are that many products. I mean, that's what I always want to ask.
Yeah.
350 million, right?
Exactly. And we're not even talking about inventory numbers. And you could probably take some guesses of who this might be, but we're talking about individual products, manufacturers, not inventory numbers, like actual individual products being sold. And so, so it was quite crazy. But what that taught us is, really through failure, is we found the approach, because not everyone is the size of that retailer. And so then we started getting involved with other retailers, and then we started working on the B2B side, which that was that aha moment, realizing, oh my gosh, the data is terrible on the B2B side. You have manufacturers sending over PDF documents.
The B2B side, I think, is so tough because they've never really had to present the data that well. I mean, some of them have had the paper catalogs, right, and they've done some of that way, but that's the problem. It's in this like PDF. It's not in a structured taxonomy. And then a lot of it's just in their ERP and behind the scenes. And they don't understand that ERP data is not very good for customer or, buying facing
right.
data, right? Like if you just saw the ERP data on a website, you'd be like, what the hell is this? Like you can't.
Yeah, code set.
So
exactly right.
I want to comment on one thing that you said that I really think is a great takeaway. It's sort of the focus on you doing one thing, like a model to do one thing.
Right.
Because I've talked with so many startups too, and startups in AI, and you're right. When they start to try to do everything, the accuracy goes down. It's just not the right approach. So doing one thing and doing one thing well, and getting that taken care of, and then moving to the next. Have 1 million models. It doesn't matter, right?
Right. Exactly.
Get it right.
Yeah, and so so a very large agency, they just told us recently that we have the largest repository of ready to deploy models in existence for machine learning. And we're like, great, that's cool, but those models have to be specifically used for a particular task. Like you can have all the tech in the world, right? I guess this is my point. You can have all the tech in the world, but if it's not solving the challenge for you as a client, then what does it matter?
Yeah.
And that's what we've seen in this space. Is there's so much hype about the AI. Oh, this is great tech. It can do this, can do that.
But
CDP they're not even,
and all these platforms, then no one uses
them. Right. Exactly right, Isaiah. And for us, we took a step back and we're like, okay, we don't ever want to build a solution that's not focused on the input and then delivering the exact output that the customer wants. So we're not a black box, and that's why we're just so transparent in our process, because for us, we're just able to rapidly build tons of models, unlike anyone that we know of, and we're doing it less expensive, at a fraction of a cost than if you had, this huge data science team. And so, so that's it. I mean,
you don't have really 3,000 people, offshore,
No, not at all. Yeah, and actually, the funny thing is, when we start, and people will ask us that, and we're like, yeah, no, we're about, like roughly about 125 employees, for our organization.
They're like, how is
That's
that
it.
possible? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so when they start seeing the scale, they're like, oh, you possibly couldn't do this. And nor are we even contracting out to try to deliver, using some kind of offshore services like that
So let's dive
for
into that.
meeting those objectives.
How
Yeah,
so you talk, there's always a human element to all this, right? So it's obviously like,
absolutely right.
you can't just like sign up for your software and then just fix all my problems magically, right? I assume that you use your software, but what would you advise? Let's say mid-market company, I think is kind of more digestible for the average listener, is like, maybe they have 100,000 SKUs, it's a mess, ERP data sucks. I don't know, 100 manufacturers or whatever, 20 manufacturers trying to bring in this data, get it on a website, a Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento. I buy your software. What do I do? Like, where do I
Yeah,
start?
great question.
Like,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think our solution is designed for
tone it down a
it.
little bit from the million,
Yeah,
350 million. Let's try and
yeah,
get simple
exactly.
right here. Yeah.
And when we came into this space, we were like, wait a minute, not everyone is the size of this retailer. So then we started getting involved, like I said, in B2B, and we uncovered the need. Okay, we have to develop a solution that will work for any size client, whether they have a few thousand SKUs or millions of SKUs. It should be an independent or agnostic system that will solve this challenge. And so currently, in fact, if you go to datax.ai, you'll see all of our pricing. We're extremely transparent.
I love how
Um,
I was like shocked that I'm like, wow, I actually can see your pricing. Like, thank God. I'm so,
yeah, yeah,
like,
and it's crazy
data
because there's
pricing
no.
is so frustrating, I don't know.
It's
I liked it
so
too.
frustrating. Yeah, and even just like if someone wants to try us, like we just have like this pay-per-use methodology of 98 cents a SKU for a full SKU build. So if you send us an NPN and a brand or manufacturer name, and you give us your template, we will fill out that template and even classification to every requirement. There's no, sometimes we'll deal with 50 attributes or hundreds of attributes. It doesn't make a difference to us because we're just focused on delivering the value. And you get way too complex with, okay, I'm going to fill out this many values and not this. We think it's not fair. We don't think it's fair to anyone for that matter. And so what we did is we tried to create this solution that works at every scale. Of course, the 98 cents, that's like just the pay per use. And then if you do volumes, it even gets less expensive from there. Really, we don't have any competitors in our space for any kind of content enrichment services. We actually really go up more so against legacy providers. And what we've seen on average, we're sometimes, or actually every time now, I think our nearest legacy provider is about 80%, or excuse me, we are they're well, this would be 300, so they're 300% more than us. And so because again, if you're having to use humans at scale, it's expensive to maintain those
Yeah.
teams.
And cheap
And
labor is
so,
becoming less and less cheap.
yeah, exactly right. So for us, our approach, again, just very straightforward, is we rely so much on ML, doing the scraping, the extraction of the values, using obviously OCR, but then also large language models, deep learning models, neural networks, to essentially get all of the data that you need into your exact template. So, and we do this for some of the largest B2B distributors in the world, as well as associations, buying groups, all that stuff. So the example you gave, Isaiah, I think that was
Walk
wonderful,
me, what
wonderful
would I do?
opportunity.
I need a template. What do I need? Because that sounds like
Yeah,
I need that, or
yeah, great question. So all you would need, if you guys have an e-commerce template or however you all build
yeah,
data
like an
out
e-commerce
today,
taxonomy template, like a Magento
yeah,
template or whatever. Yeah.
exactly. Whatever template that you guys have, you literally just send us a list of SKUs and you share your template. And if you have a hierarchy that you want us to classify the data for you, we'll do that as well. We also do something called partial enrichment because a lot of customers, they have decent data for some of their products, but they're still missing maybe a few attributes. So we realized a fundamental need is to even just offer partial enrichment because you might
Yeah.
have good data, but not great data,
Yeah.
right?
You have like kind of half
Uh,
the SKU, right? You have a description, but no
yeah,
attributes or whatever.
yeah, exactly. And so, and you guys, I mean, I'm excited to tell you some of the other things that we do. It's pretty awesome. But point being is that partial enrichment, we are able to do that for even less. So you're talking about like even pay per use, like 20, 30 cents a SKU, right? Just to fix those partial enrichment SKUs. And that's not even with volume commitments. So it's just, we wanted a solution that works for every company size, regardless of how much, how much
Let
revenue.
me break this down. You need a template, right? Because you need a taxonomy, right? And so that's where I think
Yeah.
the consulting and the human element comes in, right? What is the structure I want for my website? Once do you upload that, or you kind of log into the software and upload this Excel file?
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, we work with whatever way is preferred to the customer. So we're a zero interruption solution provider, which means that however they're doing it today, so if they have a template they're filling out, they send us the template list of SKUs, we'll fill it out and email it back to them if that's their preferred mode of engagement. Or we actually have this amazing platform. It's all included. There's no additional price. There's no setup fees. There's no consulting fees, nothing. We'll give you access to our platform where you can just log in with your user credentials. You can upload the data yourself, and then you can actually see the process. And this means that it's completely still white glove, where you don't have to do anything. You just get to see, as a batch comes in, you get to see the stage of where your batch is in SKU processing. And so you get to see, okay, it's in queue, it's in process, it's been accepted and completed, and then you can even do a review and audit if you want to, which we're still doing that ourselves. So it's a completely white glove service for everything that we're talking about here.
I assume, like, so if you're a distributor and you have 100 manufacturers, do you need to upload, let's say, 100 different files? Is it going to kind of like take them all in and normalize them, or how would that?
Yeah, great question. So we have a few ways to engage. So if they already have the files that they're getting from their manufacturer, they can just dump that data directly into our system. Or if like they prefer, we set up like FTP where they drop it, or they upload it into our platform.
So you guys will even make it like
or
kind
email
of an automated process potentially.
Yeah, this is actually something really cool. So it's being talked about publicly now. It's a revolutionary solution, and we didn't even know that. We just saw a fundamental need, and we're a data science company, right? We're not domain experts, but now because we work across every industry in B2B and B2C, or relatively every, we're not doing much in lumber. But with that being said, we have this solution where it's called the Supplier Connector. It's on our website. Everyone has a supplier portal, right? So in like PIMS, ERP, all that good stuff. But what makes this different is what we've seen, as a fundamental need is, manufacturers hate filling out templates. They absolutely hate filling out templates, and having to send over that data. They just want to be able to provide that data however it's most comfortable for them. Well, our portal allows them to dump the data, whatever export that they want to send us, whatever's most convenient for them. So that means no more beating them over the head saying, can you fill out my template, while they laugh at you and say, no, I'm not going to do this for my 2,000 channels, my distributor channels. And so, of course, some manufacturers, they care about the relationship with you because maybe you're selling a lot of their product, but it's still a lift for them where they have to manipulate the template, or they might have to sign up for like a Salsify or a subscription, like a syndication service, where they're having to pay for all that to set it up. What we're saying is our revolutionary product allows them to dump the data however they want to send it, and we will ingest, normalize, validate, classify the data, and even further enrich into whatever your taxonomy template is. Yeah. And just so you know how we do this is just for everything that we do, we take a hybrid approach of, as much automation on the back end through ML as possible. And then, of course, our human in the loop approach, where we're using our own data analyst, and sometimes data that, maybe it's just not good enough, where machine learning can't actually process the data. Maybe the tech just doesn't exist. And that's where, again, it doesn't matter. It's still white glove, where our team still goes ahead and validates and enriches and normalizes that data as needed. But there's no additional cost. Everything is completely static in price. So there's no, variation in price because of effort.
So I have a question about photos, videos, schematics, all that sort of stuff.
Great question.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that a lot of the clients that I've worked with, it's become this huge issue, because even if they're relatively organized with, dollars and measurements and, all of these different things, then all of a sudden they realize, oops, we didn't, we don't have 100% coverage for, the photos, and customers are demanding like videos of how to put these things together and whatever. So how are you dealing with that in addition to all the other elements?
Well, great question. After this pod, we certainly need to sync up.
Yeah, I think we do.
but but yeah, so essentially we can ingest any of the data that is provided from a manufacturer. So that means not just, I mean, again, not just images and text data from a CSV file, but PDF documentation. So most of our manufacturers, they're sending us over tons of PDF documents where the attribute values exist somewhere in that 1,000-page PDF document, or blueprints, schematics. We ingest all of this data, and what we do is we scrape that information and then use LLM, and then of course any other type of deep learning model that we might need to build to be able to extract the values needed for your required coverage, meaning for your template. So like another example is safety data sheets. People do a horrible job with safety data sheets.
Yep.
Our solution actually extracts all that information, as well as even like there's challenges for like ETIM and USPSC standards and all that stuff. Our system will classify all of this. I mean, I know all of this sounds too good to be true, but don't trust us. Like literally any folks listening on this pod, like, let us prove it to you. Don't even believe me. And well, this is what we do fundamentally.
I want to bring up something for our listeners, because, I worked with, I was working as an employee for a manufacturer not too long ago, and we had some of these issues, and there are, all kinds of product issues, just figuring things out. And it's like, well, Tim, you're in e-commerce, but you go work with the engineers, right?
Right.
Like, I'll go work with the engineers. So I had to get like all of these, as you said, like 1,000-page PDFs or whatever, trying to figure out like, well, is there anything I can do with it? Right. And it's nice that in that time, since I had that kind of a role to now, you actually can do something with it instead of Tim saying like, it's page 45 of the PDF that we extract and do, it was really that kind of thing. Yeah.
So I'm curious how, it seems like this is obviously valuable for retailers and distributors. They struggle to kind of normalize their data. What about for manufacturers and brands that they're responsible for the data? Are you guys able to kind of like machine learning, kind of auto suggest, update, enrich their data, right? Like maybe they have like a base level of data and it's like, hey, make it better. And you guys can kind of do that, or how would that work for like a brand that actually is the responsible for their own data,
Yeah, great question, Isaiah. So typically how we interact with manufacturers, I mean, this is what we do today. When we come in, they're like, this is the number one challenge that we always hear from manufacturers. They'll say, I have my data, I have all these channels that I want to syndicate out to, all the marketplaces, wherever, all of our channel resellers or distributors and retailers. So when we interact with them, we first off offer, hey, we can syndicate all of your data from your exact output into their required template, and then also classify for each one of those. So if Amazon has, obviously Amazon has their own classification, eBay has their own, all the marketplaces, and then every granular retailer that they have usually has their own standard of classification and template. We're talking about we'll syndicate all of that and solve this problem, right? And then what they'll also, then we say to them, we're like, hey, just FYI, as we're syndicating all this data out, your channels have requirements, right? Where maybe they want this resolution image, or they want this multiple image, or they prefer 360 spin photography or videos.
Walmart, the marketplaces are
right.
Yeah.
And so what we do for manufacturers from a holistic view, and again, this is also being viewed as, oh my gosh, this is like awestruck, where we're telling them, hey, from all of your channels, we have noticed insights where they want 150 characters for their title, and they want this particular concatenation of formula in their title. So we give all these insights collectively or on an individual basis. So then they can determine, because we would deal with some of the largest manufacturers in the world. A lot of them have their own team, but then even for some of the smallest manufacturers, they just want to know, like, hey, what is the best way to send out a title? Right? For all of my channels. Well, sure, here's a concatenated formula that we'd recommend, or resolution specs, or any additional values or classifications, so we provide all those insights to them directly. Yeah. It's almost like a scorecard, So we're basically, we can even grade them and show, hey, this is from all across all of your channels. These are their requirements, and this is where you live up to those requirements.
Yeah.
For
So
us, we're
I
still
have a,
doing enrichment.
I have a crazy question. It's
Sure.
crazy. You ready? So
Yeah.
this again, and I bring a lot of the stuff to this podcast from people I'm talking to out in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I was asked recently if there was any AI currently available, like, maybe like a Dolly Mid-Journey kind of solution where you could take a schematic or a product description and create an image in a very automated fashion. So just saying like download 1,000 of these or upload 1,000 of these somewhere and then like get images for them. Is there anything that you're aware of like that?
Yeah. So not with ensured accuracy, but actually let me do one better for you. So this is something that we're currently working on. They wanted to be able to take schematics, dimensions, not even drawings, but just basically, blueprints, and build a 3D, three-dimensional image of architecture. That's something that we currently do, because at that point we're taking measurements and then we're applying those measurements in a logical way. That way we can ensure, form of accuracy. But to create, just take images and create like this full scaled image, that's where there's significant limitations, because you run into, okay, what exactly are you wanting to see in the gap fill? It just depends on the requirement. So the short answer is maybe, depending on what the requirement is.
I'll give you a sort of an angle on this. They had people experimenting with this and taking descriptions and basically loading them as prompts in tools like Midjourney and others, right? Not just Midjourney. And they were getting pretty close, strangely enough.
They're actually really good. Yeah.
Like if you just take all of that description and if it's detailed enough and it says like it's a smooth surface and it's green and it's the, whatever, these are the dimensions, it will generally create something good, but they're looking for something at the next level that you could do at like 1,000 at a time or 10,000.
I guess you probably have to standardize some of the inputs.
Yeah, exactly right.
If you're able to certain those, then you might be able to do it, but you might be limited on what you get. But it could work for certain, like a B2B company that doesn't. We need
I'm telling you, the tech is definitely getting better and better with generative AI. It's just, if it's mission critical data, which is most of the stuff that we work in, it gets, do you want to mitigate, like, how can you mitigate that risk of, having accuracy for that particular product data? So for us, we don't deal in that space, but I am confident, just because, again, we play around with this stuff all day, every day, to see if we can, because if you really think about a description, all it is a concatenation of attributes, right? Because you just go to, Midjourney and you type up, I want to, have a flamingo dancing, right? Those are just attributes. And so so the tech is definitely getting there, but it just depends on what's the application.
So I want to get into a little bit of, like, we're talking very much in the weeds, and I think it's really good just going deep into product data and how important it is. But what are you just seeing in B2B that, it sounds like you guys were kind of astonished by how, like, behind B2B was with product data and e-commerce. That's part of why we started this podcast, is we feel like B2B commerce is just quite far behind B2C in many ways. It's also more complex. The buying process is more complex. So the features they need on the website are more complex in general. I'm talking in generalities, but anything that you've just seen, doesn't have to be exactly related to product data, where you're just like, this was kind of interesting, or B2B companies should be thinking more about these processes, or what, I guess, like, what advice would you give B2B companies, especially ones that don't have 3,000, data enrichment folks and scientists, and, they maybe have a small team, limited on what they can do, most B2B companies, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, first off, don't be afraid to explore more of your niche. So if you have like a niche in the market where, you're just doing really well in particular products, well, then I would just encourage every B2B company to explore what that means for them and to drive deeper into it. Because not everybody's going to be able to, compete against the Fastenals or the Grangers of the world, right? So first off, I would just say, through our observations, we see that these particular B2B companies who really know their market, they focused, okay, what are our top performing A, B, and C SKUs, right? Well, why are there A, just examining those A SKUs to derive insights, how are they performing? That's, I mean, again, these are all, fun. We all know this, right? This is just not novel idea, but really not being afraid to just dive deeper into that niche and then just pursuing excellence in category by category. Because I'm going to tell you, the largest B2B distributors, they have the exact challenges at as a small, $1 million revenue per year, a distributor. The challenges are still the same. There's no difference. It's just at scale is really the introduction of
So
complexity.
your advantage being smaller is almost just getting very focused and honed in on maybe that category, selection of categories,
Absolutely.
and doing a better job, right? On those.
Yep.
On
Yep,
those categories,
exactly. And I will say this, we've seen that these B2B distributors who are huge, right, massive, they've spent fortunes on trying to improve product data, trying to, figure out ways or insights how to make the experience better. But now, like, even this solution that we're talking about from our company or the various solutions we offer, we're coming in on the tail end and saying, hey, we can do this faster and less expensive and better than these huge budgets that have been spent on doing a lot of these things, right? So I would say I would encourage every B2B distributor at every level to really don't be afraid to adopt innovation, but make sure that you have the roadmap understood, that you know the exact input and you know the exact output of that innovation. Don't work with companies that are so high level and just focused on creating cool tech. Yeah.
No, it's a great answer, honestly.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple other angles, you had talked about how, and it's wonderful that your pricing is just like completely transparent and that it's scalable, the volume discounts and all this sort of stuff. Do you also offer consulting services? I mean, just as a separate thing, like people come to you and say, I have these issues and I'm not sure how to approach it. I'm not ready to just say template and whatever. I mean, is
Yeah.
that else that you guys offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're limited to some. Obviously, if there's custom AI solutions, that's part of our crowd analytics arm. So if there's something like maybe just you're like, hey, would this be something you guys could build? Absolutely. So that's part of our crowd analytics side of the house. But specifically, if it's pertaining to anything with digital transformation of data, that's where DataX that's our bread and butter all day. So in terms of a lot of consultant work that we do would be around taxonomy in terms of audits and also harmonizing those data models as well. So we do that as well. That's a solution we offer. We've also seen that we're a fraction of because again, we're a data science company, right? We're not domain experts. So that's where we would still rely on a customer who has domain expertise. But for us, we're deriving insights by looking at your competitors to recommend, attributes and, categories, how many levels. And now, I mean, we have our own taxonomy. We've built our own custom, taxonomy across B2B industries. And we specialize now even in, obviously electrical, HVAC, plumbing, industrial, just some pretty crazy industries that's very technical data. And so, and that's also why we're approved vendors for like, the electrical, association and so many other associations, Hardy. I mean, just we deal with very technical data. So for us, when we come in and consult, we're coming from a position of strength and we're able to prove to you that, hey, we have deduced this would be your most appropriate, category attribute hierarchy and essentially taxonomy for your business.
Do you also work in banking and finance or health because of all the regulatory standards there and the different way that things work? I mean, do you work in those areas as well?
So we're not working in finance or banking. We actually have done a lot of work in health. I mean, obviously for some huge pharmaceutical companies, just some really cool projects. We're now also we've just joined. We're a solution provider for the. We're going to be attending the Department of Defense AI Symposium for DC. So we're actually one of the approved vendors for them.
That's fun.
And so, yeah, so you can imagine some of the crazy, projects that would, go along with something
I've
like
been
that.
to some events like that, and they are crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
It's like, oh my god.
Do you see a use case evolving outside of product data as this expands, and maybe going into other industries beyond just like e-commerce?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because what we also realized, through this journey, and again, we're not a startup anymore. We're a profitable company. So, what we've learned through failure has really, developed our success. So it's not just about, hey, can we fix product data? But once you've actually fixed product data, what can you do with that information? How can you leverage the data that you already have? So what a lot of people don't realize is you can, again, use product data and even transaction data as well as customer data. And if you have all three of those services, it gives you insights that are absolutely unreal. So like here's a really cool example that we do. What happens if you want to predict or forecast the success of a potentially new product that you've never sold before? Well, how do you do that? Really, the only way. Yeah.
You asked Tim and Isaiah,
Yeah, exactly. So for us, what we do is we actually will break down if we have access to, obviously your product data, your transaction data, and customer data, we can leverage those three to really give us insights and deduce, the success of a new product. Because what we do is we will look at across your entire catalog and see products that are similar that have sold and to what people and how much to really give us those insights to figure out.
A market research arm. You can become a market research.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
And that's just one example. And another one would be invoice data. Again,
any structured data, right? Any kind of structured data.
Yeah. Well, and for us, we deal with any unstructured data first. We then can structure that data and then use that structured data for any purpose that they'd want. So another example, there was a government, agency that brought us in, and they wanted us to look at CCTV footage, right? And you're talking about unstructured data in millions of hours of CCTV footage, and they want us to look for deriving insights or even satellite imagery for shipping lanes, okay, what's a ship, what's a small ship, what size ship? You're talking about unstructured data in millions of hours or millions of data sets beyond any human ability of comprehension of processing. So then we take that data, we structure it into deriving the particular insights we're looking for. And then now we have more structured data sets, and then we can go from there. And we're doing these things, we're delivering these solutions at a fraction of the cost if you were to try to, whether it be using a human team or build ML on your own. For us, we just have a hack. That's it. Of building ML at scale. That's it.
I like it. You have a hack. That's good.
That's it. Yeah, we're very transparent in our process because we know how difficult it is to build models to derive accuracy that's trustworthy.
Yeah.
And that's why it's almost impossible. And there's also a reason why law, medical, they're not using generative AI in their current processes.
I imagine there's a huge opportunity in law and medical, right? Because medical has these structured, all this information that needs to be digested or cataloged, and then law, same thing. How can you no one knows every law by heart, right? There's just so many.
Procurement. I mean, just imagine, guys, procurement is huge, especially with our solutions. Yeah.
So my mind is just, whirring right now thinking of this. So I'm almost thinking here, like, of all the business opportunities that you could just be in that maybe you're not already. Like I say, like the market research is huge. And people, I mean, I've worked with a number of startups that were then acquired by Merkle, and Merkle is a giant data company. I worked with cognitive data there before they were acquired, and I was working there for quite a while, and I was a data guy at one point, so I did that stuff, and those things were, it was fascinating what we could do at the time I was there, and I know I've followed them since. But it's always larger and larger pools with better and better tools. That's kind of the way I describe it to people. It's like, the data pools are bigger and the tools are getting better. And so now it's like, well, the opportunity increases exponentially along with the size of the data pool and the quality of the tools. So, you could be reporting on anything. Like, I constantly talk with retailers about like trends and next season, and they're people are not planning for the holidays now. They're really done with that. They're thinking like, well, what am I ordering for spring and summer and fall of next year?
Yeah.
For apparel, for example, or back to school 2024. And
Yep.
so how do you map that all out? What data sets do you use? And you have that weird position that you're in where you actually could try to convince all the people you're working with to create something, and
Yes.
use all of that
Exactly
data,
right.
you know?
Yeah. And when we come in and work with any size distributor, we're working with trash data, like data that is
Trash.
ERP. Yeah, like it is bad, guys. The meaning a human could not conclude what this should be. And even if they have domain expertise, they're like, well, I don't know what this 6-digit code is,
Yeah,
unless you
unless
have some
you
reference point.
work there, yeah. If you don't work
Yeah.
there, you have no idea. Yeah.
And so that's why we're kind of being compared to like almost like the Swiss Army knife of, hey, you have trash data, then we're going to be your trusted advocate to fix that data.
Yeah.
And then once that data is fixed, we can even talk about like what are your specific use cases that you would even like to see. So whenever we work with a customer, we'll come in and we'll do a lot of times ERP cleanup data. That's actual inexpensive solution we charge cents per SKU just to review and fix their data in their ERP system. And then once we fix that data, they're like, oh my gosh, you guys did a great job. Well, what other services we earn trust, and then we just branch out and we start working with all these different groups in that organization. So for us, we just more so get our foot in the door, and then we do all these other things. And again, last point here is we're less excited or even just impressed with our own tech. We just want to know, is this solution going to solve your problem? We like, for example, even our presentations when we meet with our clients, we're not even interested in showing them all of what we can do because it's enormous, right? We only want to focus what is your biggest pain point and your challenge, and then we will try to hopefully solve that challenge. That's it.
We're getting towards the end here, so maybe
Yeah.
let's segue towards any last kind of advice or kind of parting words for B2B folks. And we're also seeing B2B blend in B2C too, so probably it crosses over there, but
Yeah. Probably just one other thing that I would say that I didn't mention earlier, there's a lot of these data syndicators out there who have like subscription services and provide data, right? Some of them it can be good, but sometimes they can become very stale over time, and they've had the data for 15 years and never modified it. We wanted to create this solution where we can ingest any of your manufacturer data or any of your syndicated data and then structure that into a distributor or retailer's taxonomy. Or if you're a manufacturer and you have all these channels that you want to get data to, we can ingest that data, and we're talking like fraction of the cost of what it would cost to do this on your own, or even hire someone to do it. So that's why we wanted to really create a valuable solution. So what I would say in terms of, to any listeners is don't be afraid to explore, other methodologies or approaches. And don't trust anyone. Make them prove it to you. Number one thing, don't trust
yeah,
anyone. And even for us, like never believe me. Let us prove it to you. And then you can conclude for yourself if this is valuable or not.
Your
I'm thankful
data
to
is
say, yeah.
trash, and trust no
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. I guess that's a paranoid side of me, but we work with the most, I would arguably say, the most complex data sets in the world. And if we can still deliver through failure, from how we've learned what to do, what not to do, then all of your listeners would be able to take advantage of those insights.
amazing.
That's great. I mean, I have just one more question
Sure.
because my mind's going in all different directions here. So again, prediction is always a tough thing, but just
Yeah.
where do you see your company going in the next few years? Like not like AI in general, or
Yeah,
just,
of course.
but where do you see, things developing over like 2-3 years from now? What do you think?
Our company is largely owned by a huge Japanese conglomerate, partially owned, and it's publicly traded company. It's all public information. You can look it up. So for us, our culture here, because we're a U.S. company, right? I think obviously the growth is absolutely endless, even with all the advances in other companies, leveraging AI for whatever purposes. For us, because we've really kind of taken the position of let's work with the most challenging portions of data sets for our customers and earned trust. I think we're just going to keep growing. Again, our growth is pretty tremendous, quite frankly, as an organization. So I'm really proud of our team. As long as we can maintain the culture, and I'm very thankful for, this large owner of our company. They have a wonderful culture, and they just see us as trying to tackle something that very few, and we don't have any competitors in our space. So we're very much in a huge need that has to be delivered. So anyway, I digress just to say I think our growth is pretty outstanding, and will continue to grow. I don't know anything more than that. Maybe if you want to, yeah.
That's all right. I mean, I think that's a fair answer. That's really great. Cool. Isaiah, what did you have to say?
No, I mean, this is all amazing. I think how can people find you so that they can test this out, or like you said, make them prove it.
Perfect. Yeah. So I would just go to datax.ai. You can also even look me up on LinkedIn. So my name is Derek, Derek, Sewell, Sewell. And again, datax.ai. You can reach out to me. I'm happy. Me and my team will have meetings with you, whatever we need to do, just to kind of get to know you a little bit better. Also, we're heavily involved in different associations, industries. You can probably talk to any of them, and they know us or work with us directly. So just a lot of fun ways where we can interact.
Amazing.
Well, thank you. That was fantastic. I think our listeners are going to be very happy. This is great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was an honor being on here today with you guys. Thank you so much for inviting me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right.